What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Houston Productions video. I'm your host, Lucas, to bring you the first review of 2023, and it is a big one. This TV show has launched as the second highest premiere behind House of the Dragon, so it is a big show. People are talking about it. It is all that anybody seems to be talking about because right now it's kind of that in-between time in TV. But yes, we are talking about, is The Last of Us worth watching? Is it worth the hype? Let's find out. But before we can dive into the short, spoiler-free, yes, spoiler-free review, I need you to do a couple things, especially if you are new around here. I need you to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It'll help the channel grow, and that's awesome, and I appreciate that. And then number two, if you are new around here or you are just not subscribed, like a lot of people who are watching this video are, go ahead and give this video a subscription. Yeah, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of great stuff coming, especially leading up to Oscars. And then go ahead and give this video also, make sure you hit that, bell notification, and then go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let me know, have you seen The Last of Us? What were your thoughts on it? How you feeling? Is 90 minutes too long for a first episode, or was it just enough to get you hooked? Well, we're going to be talking about all those things in a short spoiler-free review, so let's find out. Is The Last of Us worth watching? Is it worth the hype? Alright, so jumping right in. First things I have to tell you is, yes, I have been a fan of The Last of Us. I have played both games, and I found the first game to, of course, be amazing, just like anybody else who's taken the time to sit down and play it. Second game was pretty good, not as good as the first. Suffered from a little bit of that sophomore slump, but hey, that kind of happens, and especially in video games, it happens a little bit more frequently than not. However, I think that this 90-minute first episode was incredible. I think it was an interesting departure from how the game begins, even though there are a lot of shot-for-shot things coming directly from the game, which is amazing. Kudos to Craig Mason, who is actually one of my favorite podcasters. Shout out to Script Notes. Go listen to them if you haven't done so. It is incredible. I remember him first announcing that he was going to be working on this, and how he had always been so excited about this game and talked about it on the podcast, and then him being able to be given the reins and really, get this thing going, launch it off the ground is incredible. So kudos to him for paying attention to detail. But basically, this episode has 3 different beginnings, which is a great way to start this. One, they introduce the concept of what is the underlying plot. There's an interview. It details a lot of different kinds of things. They talk about some stuff in detail. Like I said, spoiler-free, so I'm not going to go into too much. But it's an interesting way to start it. It starts off by giving you a sense of feeling that something is coming. Then you have the second beginning, I guess you could say, the second one. Starts off in Austin, Texas in 2003, which, as someone who lives in Texas, it's always cool to see Texas on the screen. And it kind of gets you used to the world. You had to kind of get reacclimated to what it was like in 2003. They do a really good job of kind of laying that groundwork in subtle ways without having such a big info dump. Even though that interview kind of is an info dump, they do a good job in the second beginning of not just throwing things at you and be like, look, it's 2003, pop culture kind of things. Subtle enough that kind of just gets you reacclimated with the world, which is amazing. Of course, things start to go haywire in 2003, and then we jump 20 years to basically now in this alternate kind of world. Post-apocalyptic baby. Post-apocalyptic babies are a thing now because, unless you were alive 20 years ago, obviously civilization, things do change. People continue to reproduce. So there's 2 sections of the world. Those who still remember what it was and those who are... that's all they know is the post-apocalyptic of what society is now, which is interesting because as soon as we get into that third beginning, I remember pausing and turning to my wife and saying, this is amazing. They're not showing us how exactly everything began because they kind of touched on it in that second beginning, which has some great set decoration, great pacing. It really gets you interested in these characters and kind of gives you an insight into Joel, which is going to be very important as to stuff about his character, his upbringing, his history, his past, why he does the things he does, and especially why he does something later in this episode that is important. And it really gets you invested, which is a great way. But as soon as that third beginning, like I said, started, I remember turning to my wife, I was like, this is amazing. They're not treating us like children. They're making the viewer understand that this is a lived-in world. Even though the world is ended and it is, the apocalypse has happened, zombies, infection, whatever you want to call them, has occurred, society didn't just cease to exist. It started to exist in a way that it needed to evolve and adapt and survive. And so there's new currency, there's new leaders, there are new boundaries. Most of the population seems to be very confined now. Everybody has jobs that are assigned to them. It seems like it's a very lived-in world because it would be. Society wouldn't necessarily be how it is like in the first few seasons of The Walking Dead where everybody's just, nomads and roaming around, which is interesting. And Not a knock on The Walking Dead, because I think every show now that involves zombies has to live up to that standard, especially for the first few seasons. But I like that this was an established world with communities and radio and electricity, and they're making things work. It's not like all of a sudden, they have to start from nothing. We see them rebuild society. No, society just adapted to survive in a way that it had to, which is interesting. It shows that there's a lot of stuff happening that we can go back to in flashbacks, which is going to be great. If you haven't played the game is incredible. Highly suggest playing that. But like I mentioned, this is brought to you by Craig Mazin. He actually makes a cameo in this episode, which is pretty cool. You can tell that there's details in here. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of depth. The set decoration, the timing, the shots, the color palettes. All of this stuff seems very well thought out by someone who really paid attention to what they were trying to accomplish, what that overall goal is. And sometimes, and especially a zombie movie, they lose that. They always tend to just, oh, look, gore. Oh, look, violence. Oh, look, guns, fire, explosions, which this has all of that. But that isn't the focus. It is the focus of the people who are still doing that day-to-day monotony of everyday life and what that looks like in a society that has basically stopped existing. A society like ours, anyway. Because like I said, there's rebellion. There are people who don't agree with the system. It's basically today's society if it had to adapt to survive because it needed to. Overall, I think this series is absolutely fantastic. And after one episode, I will say it is absolutely worth the hype. If you haven't sat down to watch it, it is a little bit of a long episode. It's not overly gory. So it might be fine for children. But like I've said before, you know your children better than I do. Y'all go ahead and make that decision. I got students of mine who come up to me and be like, have you seen John Wick? I'm like, how are you watching John Wick at your age? But it happens, so I'm gonna let y'all make that decision. Check out a trailer. It kind of shows you the extent of some of the graphicness of there. But yes, definitely check this show out. It is very much worth the hype. I am very excited. I think that this has a lot of potential to it. And then hearing Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, the producers who really got this thing off the ground, hearing them talk about it in interviews really gets me even more excited. They're not talking about making this the next Game of Thrones. They're not talking about making this 7, 8, 10 seasons. No, they're going to stay true to the games. They are going to only go with the story that has been provided them by the game creators, which is amazing because it is such a deep, layered, detailed story. I don't think it needs anything additional, but it gives you enough flexibility to add a little bit of depth and character to a lot of the characters that may seem minor in the game. So this is going to be a great series, guys. I'm not going to spoil anything, but just buckle up. We are in for a great ride. And if the first episode told us anything important about this series, it is going to be good. So definitely check out The Last of Us streaming on HBO Max. The first episode is out now. They will be coming out at 9, 8 Central on Sundays, I believe, so make sure you tune into that. And definitely drop a comment down below, guys. Let me know. Have you seen The Last of Us? What'd you think about it? I thought that it was incredible, but I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on The Last of Us. Is it worth the hype and conversation it's getting? In my eyes, absolutely. But I may be a little jaded and maybe a little biased because, like I said, I loved the games. I think the games were incredible, and knowing where it's going, I can't wait to see how Craig Mazin really gets this thing off and running. After one episode, in my opinion, guys, it is worth watching. It is worth the hype, and get yourself some popcorn, grab a soda, grab a drink, whatever you want to do, but just turn off the lights and enjoy great storytelling, great acting, great chemistry at its finest. HBO does it again with another hit show, and I can't wait for Sunday night to watch the next episode. With that being said, guys, I'm your host, Lucas. Thank you for tuning in. Happy watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.